It's hard to know where to start. You touched on everything that matters. I was struck in this last week by how much it feels like the entire history of the country, maybe even of the world, depends on one man. That we have gotten ourselves into a situation where if this man fails, we are done. And partly it's because the number of qualified people going into public service is at, I think, an all-time low. That, as my wife would say, why would you want to run for office? But I have to say, I think you're on the wrong track when you talk about the decline of empire. I really think it is not accurate to talk about the United States as an empire in anything like the way the word has been used in the past. We are a dominant power, yes. We're beginning to see the limits of our power. I mean, one of the headlines that really struck me this past month was the item that came out in the newspaper the other day. More troops in January died by suicide than by enemy fire. That's got to be something, a real wake-up call for the notion that this country has the military power to dominate the world. But we have not been politically dominating the way Great Britain, or certainly than Rome, was. And we have no colonies to withdraw from, no colonies of importance to withdraw from. Rather, we should be expending our effort instead of trying to tell other people how to live our lives, their lives, like we're currently doing in Afghanistan. We're in Afghanistan, not exactly because of the Taliban, although that's part of it, but because we can't admit to ourselves, we will go home and let these poor women be dominated again by the religious right. But that's not our call, folks. That's their country. And that's the mode that we have to change.
Just a couple of comments. One on the last one, there was a really good article on commondreams.org. If that's not a website that you're familiar with, I would encourage you to take a look at it. It just has a variety of articles on many issues daily. And last week, if you look up, there was an article on commondreams.org. I'm trying to remember who the writer was, but it was originally appeared in the Huffington Post, but you could find it. And it's an interview with Afghan women, saying that from their perspective, yes, there are many problems with the Taliban, but their situation is much worse as a result of war. And an escalation of the war will dramatically, their situation will deteriorate dramatically. So, and they point out that this argument is being used, that the reason we're there is to protect Afghan women. And the Afghan women are said, we don't want your protection, because everything that goes on in the militarized society ends up costing women in terms of rape, in terms of all kinds of things. So just on that particular issue, if anybody is interested in a follow-up, there's a great article there. A couple other comments about what you said. Just a quick one on the empire. It's not a word that I chose. It's a word that administration officials used themselves about what they're doing. But I guess I would say that we have functioned as an empire. It's a different kind of empire. It's a different kind of imperialism. But when you have no other nation in the history of the world has ever had 750 permanent military bases outside of its borders, which we do, and we're expanding the number. No nation in history has had a pledge to intervene in as many places as we do to protect oil routes, to garner oil. No country in the history of the world has overthrown more governments and put client kings in power as Rome did than the United States of America. So I think we are an empire. I think we have functioned as an empire. But more importantly, I think whether we call it empire or not, we suffer from the military overstretch. So every effort that the United States is using to hold on to that foreign influence through the use of military power is accelerating our economic decline. And that's what needs to be reversed. And then one last comment you made about all the pressure on Obama. I feel very badly for him. But the problems are much, much deeper than that. Here's where, I don't want to enter too pessimistic a mode, but let me just say that we have a number of problems that are peaking at the same time. Population growth is one that we hardly ever talk about, but very serious problem. We're approaching peak oil. In the United States, there was a 40-year gap between peak discovery and decline in terms of production. The peak discovery of oil worldwide was 40 years ago. So we're approaching peak oil and energy prices are going to soar. We have already captured and used up most of the available minerals that we use in our overconsumptive community. All that is hitting at the same time. The budget deficit crisis that I agree that needs to be temporarily put on hold if we make investments in things that really matter rather than war and tax breaks for the wealthy. But there's serious budget issues. We've hit a similar kind of curve. All those are hitting at the same time, and to expect one man to get us out of it when that one man is beholden to many of the interests that are at the heart of many of these other problems isn't fair to him, but it also lets us off the hook. Because here's where, again, I think our challenge is more, yes, short term, but also the medium term of how do we become a voice that helps turn the deepening crisis into an opportunity in terms of vision and direction. I think that's our central task.
Yeah, I'm struck by how many governments our CIA has undermined. How many times we've bombed Guatemala, things like that for so long. How much damage we've done to so many nations. But therein lies my question. What is your take on the World Court and the real evildoers? What is your take?
Well, one of the things I didn't mention that was part of the grand strategy, remember I was talking about increasing military spending, regime change in Iraq, militarization of space. The neocons also wanted to undermine the creation of either the creation, and if they couldn't that, the authority of the International Criminal Court. I find that very revealing because arguably we have an administration, many people in this administration have violated international norms, international law, Geneva Conventions, other things that some of which are considered war crimes under the Geneva Conventions. So I actually really hope that we have that institutions like the International Criminal Court and the World Court, that we would actually give them more power. Because if we do not have accountability, then none of these problems actually ever gets reversed. So I think the United States, this is part of imperial decline. Part of imperial, and it's a benefit in my view of imperial decline, is that imperial decline implies that your rulers can no longer act with impunity because they assign themselves a position above all others. And instead says, which I've been saying for a long time, our hope as a people really rests with joining the community of nations in common efforts to address problems like climate change and other things, or finding negotiated solutions to some of these problems now that are very deep in Afghanistan and elsewhere. But as long as we adopt this idea that we are somehow a special, privileged, number one, above others, above international law, then that may have sounded good for many years for a lot of people, and it probably came with some privileges. It allowed us to use 25% of the world's oil and be 5% of the world's people. But I would say part of that Kairos moment is a lot of the chickens are coming home to roost. And now we need to recognize again, see this as an opportunity. So I think we need to strengthen those institutions.